Give it up for Sean Charters, everybody.
So, as you get older, you realize that things change, and I am closer to 100 than 0. One of the things I found is that it's uncool to ask people where they're from, because some come from a ways, get kind of pissed off. I can't afford to get offended because, as I've mentioned to people before, as soon as I open my mouth, people realize I don't have an accent, and they do, and they immediately want to know where I'm from. And to be fair to me, they don't even ask a question, really. They just come up towards you, and it's a half question, half statement, and a bad accent imitation. They say, "Good day, mate. What part of Australia are you from?" Now, depending on how many times I've heard that during a single day, I more or less politely answer them by saying, "Well, good day, mate's not really a greeting that we use in South Africa, which is really where I'm from." Disturbingly, though, it's immediately followed by equally excited questions. "Do you guys have kangaroos down there? Do they jump around in the street? Have you ever seen one?" Now, that's symptomatic of one of three things. One, they can't wrap their head around a white African. 2, they weren't fucking listening in the first place. Or 3, they weren't paying attention during the biology or geography section of their social studies class. Now, depending on what kind of mood I am, I usually point out at that point, listen, while there's no kangaroos where I come from, you've got to watch out for lions, elephants, and zebra crossings in the city of Johannesburg of 15 million people, which is where I grew up. A little bit bigger than Carbonear. If I'm in a bad mood, though, I usually point out to them that calling a South African an Australian is pretty much the same thing as calling a Canadian an American. Now, the other thing that I've noticed is the changing attitudes towards people wearing fragrances. Now, I'm unashamedly a fragrance guy, and I try my best, though, and so I've got to say sorry up front. I try not to wear fragrance where you're not supposed to, and if I do, I just put a little dot behind each ear. So I'm also a substitute teacher for fun, for what it's worth, by choice. So a couple of years ago, I'm walking towards a school where I know I don't get invited to teach because I'm a good teacher, which I am, but because I got a bit of a reputation as a skeet whisperer. So I'm going into the school, and the principal's coming towards me, and he never greets me, despite the fact that I've been inside his war zone many times. But he's coming towards me. He's got his arms outstretched, and I think to myself, oh, today's the day where he's actually going to give me a welcome hug. Anyway, not the case. He comes into my personal space. He leans in, puts his head right in my neck. He's obviously smelling the residue of fragrance remaining on my jacket, because I haven't even had a chance to take that off. And he says to me, "You stink," loudly. He says, "This is a fragrance-free environment." The immediate thought that comes to my mind, I say, yeah, it's also a weapon-filled environment with too many transphobic and homophobic students and literally a rat-infested building. And fragrance seems to be his biggest problem. So I was tempted to tell him to fuck off, but and add to the F words being used as translation in that environment. But I resisted, knowing that I was the best-smelling skeet whisperer they'd ever had at that school, and they probably needed me. Now, the reason I thought about this is because a few weeks after that, I'm walking around Quidi Vidi Lake, which you all know just here, and this elegant-looking elderly lady is coming towards me, and as she passes me, she smells fantastic, beautiful. So I think to myself, well, I'm going to tell her, but now she's already gone past me. So I think, well, that's going to frighten her, and it's a bit creepy. So I say to myself, if she comes past me one more time, I'm going to actually tell her she smells great. So she does, and I do tell her. So she calls me up, she says, "Come here." And she comes towards me, and she's got her arms outstretched, and she's also going to invade my personal space. She sticks her head into my shoulder here, and she proceeds to give me that long overdue hug, and she tells me, "I smell fantastic." And she explains that she's so embarrassed about wearing fragrance that she sprays it on and she walks around Quidi Vidi and she's so pleased to meet a kindred spirit like me who appreciates fragrance. So now we're lifelong lakeside friends, and we've been smelling each other for years. Now, the other thing I noticed that's changed is in work and school environments, people don't encourage people to be brave anymore. They're more sort of stimulating the fear of what could go wrong. So a couple of months ago, I'm quite excited because my son comes to me and he says, I'm building a plasma cutter for a science fair project. Jesus, I'm excited, man, because I've always wanted a plasma cutter. I watch those reality shows where they cut through old motorcycles and old cars, and then they build new cars and new motorcycles, and a plasma cutter is a vital piece of metal cutting equipment. I basically had a fantasy that I want to have one in the trunk of my car, and in case someone parks me in, I can haul it out, attach it to the power supply, the gas cylinders, cut off the front of the person's car or the back or the side, leave a note on the sidewalk with a detached piece and say, sorry, buddy, but you did park me in. So I'm a little disappointed when my son comes out of the basement with this little plasma cutter in a shoebox. That's not quite what I had in mind. But then again, I'm excited where he actually demonstrates to me that it cuts through metal. So I say to him, listen, do you want me to help you take this to school so it doesn't get damaged? And he says to me, no, I'm not allowed to take it to school. I actually have to make a video of it because it's too dangerous, and I have to show the video to my schoolmates. And I'm going, oh, Jesus. I'm thinking back to the time when I went to school. We had this industrial arts teacher. Now, industrial arts was a combination of metalwork and woodwork. And he invited us to make medieval weapons. Now, think about that. It was exciting, man. There were broadswords. There were cool helmets. There was like spiky Morning Star maces that you could swing around. And there were double-handed, double-bladed, two-handed, double-bladed battle axes. But the best thing by far was my buddy Grant. And he made a fully functional crossbow. And for the bow, he used the leaf springs of an F-150 Ford suspension. Now, the steel in that suspension is designed to hold up a pickup truck. So you can imagine the torque in that bow. So the teacher's excited. Teacher lines us all up around the quad at school. They find a 55-gallon drum. They put it at the end of the quad in front of a brick wall. Grant's there winding up the mechanism to get his bow taut and the torsion correct. He puts a bolt in, and wham, he pulls the trigger. Boom, boom. The bolt goes right through the drum, both sides, embeds itself in the wall, 3 inches into the wall. It takes 2 students to pull the bolt out of the wall. Anyway, the demonstration continues. The excitement builds. Teachers bring their classes out to watch. Students are hanging over the balcony, hanging out of windows to watch. And the teacher's walking around the quad like a nobleman running his own medieval tournament. I'm thinking to myself, imagine I did that now in Newfoundland. There'd be complete pandemonium. There'd be a CBC news story before you could blink. And there'd be one of those breathless-sounding CBC reporters asking whoever was education minister this week, anxiously, the usual boring CBC question. What do you think was going through that teacher's mind, inviting students to bring medieval weapons to school? And is it also true, the rumor's true, that it was the same teacher who was caught wearing fragrance to school a few years ago? Thank you.